Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. Patriots Against CPS Corruption invites you to attend our March for Texas Children. DFPS has failed the families of Texas. The Texas Special Committee on DFPS has also failed to hear the parents and their children. Time to make our voices heard and surround yourself with those on the same mission as you. Join us on the March for Our Children, September 21st, 2022, starting at 1 p.m. at 701 West 51st Street, Austin, Texas, 78751. I've got a brand new guest. I have book author Lorraine Nilon. She's a spiritual tour guide life coach with over 20 years experience researching and navigating what impedes our soul maturity and emotional growth. Lorraine teaches others about the importance of being self reflective and to value their uniqueness. She is an advocate for feet on the ground spirituality, meaning no bypassing the emotional baggage, and has a realistic and engaging way of explaining how to explore life and develop a healthy awareness. She is also the book author of Breaking Free from the Chains of Silence, a respectful exploration into the ramifications of abuse hidden behind closed doors. This is a book about childhood trauma in adults, which is so prevalent. It has become a silent epidemic. The lasting scars are difficult to heal. This profoundly important book contains valuable insights into the thought processes and emotional impact the abused contend with daily. And also, abuse is never contained to a present moment. It lingers across a person's lifetime and has pervasive long-term ramifications and long-term effects, confusion, shame, people pleasing, and it's a constant emotional battle. I welcome you to my podcast. Lorraine, how are you? And what
I'm
got
good.
you in writing this magnificent book?
Oh, what got me started? Well, actually, my main genre is spirituality and but dealing with your emotional baggage. And I take on clients and in the life coaching. And I went through a stage, started probably 20 years ago, where every second person that was coming to see me was a victim. And so I started documenting the themes of what they were having to deal with. So it's not a book of stories. It's a book of, you know, different victims have to contend with all these different things that happen, like these long-term ramifications. So once I started getting, I always say the victims educated me, is that once you understand the themes and then what's missing, like they've got these misconceptions about their unworthiness because of the abuse. So once you start building up that platform of unpacking the misconceptions that started from it. So as I documented, then all of a sudden I had all this wealth of information, and other victims would go, "Oh God, I wish I'd known that, 20 years ago." So
Mhm.
so I started documenting it, putting it in a book. But it took me 12 years before from starting to document to actually publishing it. So yeah, it was an interesting but really heart-wrenching journey, because
Mhm.
abuse is not my history.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like this introduction into this world of just how hard it is for them to exist on a daily basis, and the amount of pressure and confusion that they experience. Because one thing I say about sexual abuse for children is that it
Mhm.
takes away their foundation of who they are. They lose that step of understanding themselves. So once they become an adult, they're doing it. And every victim is different. Every person's recount of their experience is different, and how they respond is different. But that is a general theme, is that their sense of self is fractured. So
Mhm. And it's
yeah.
fractured permanently because I guess, what I have heard is, this low self-esteem and whatever happened to them at that age, like say 12 years old, they're like stuck in that 12-year age train of thought. And then when they go through adulthood, and marry, and then they have kids, these memories may start coming back and hitting home, and it starts possibly destroying their relationship with their spouse and their family.
Yeah. Oh, and it's interesting. I couldn't count how many clients I've met that it was during childbirth that the memories started flooding back. And from an energetic read from the soul intuitive stuff that I do, it's because in that moment you lose all control. You know what I mean? Like whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and regardless of what you think should happen, childbirth's one of those things you're on for the ride sort of thing. And it's that feeling of helplessness and not sure what's going to happen that triggers it off for a lot of people. So,
Mm-hmm.
so it kind of, all these beautiful events that they can have in life can also be the events that, trigger off all these deep suppressed memories. And the suppression of the memories is their survival mechanism that they've
Mm-hmm.
had to use to, I always say, well, that's what you had to do to keep yourself upright. And now when you're, if you're sitting in front of me having a session, it's like, well, you know that you're ready to sort of delve into it and start unpacking it and pull out those misconceptions that, the first one I always go for is you didn't deserve it. And it doesn't matter what you've been told or how you've felt, you just didn't deserve it. No child ever does.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the one thing, like I always say with breaking free, um, the book is that it's more a documentation of what indifference does. So a pedophile is indifferent to the child. He doesn't care um, the long-term ramifications. He doesn't care. And that's the same. It's like narcissistic relationships and things like that. Those types of people, it's their indifference energy, their ability to have only concern for their own desires, and without taking any responsibility or ownership over what that's inflicting on another. And that causes, just that alone causes a lot of pain in people.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, and it's inflicted by a sadist, because I was talking about narcissism to one of my guests, and he said, well, a narcissist causes pain, but so does a sadist.
definitely. Yeah. And it's that real deep rooted, um, that it's very hard to explain to people that haven't experienced being on the complete receiving end of indifference. When somebody has a complete disregard for your well-being, your sense of self, your freedom to be you and to even be happy, there's a whole nother level of pain and hurt that comes with that. So, and that
Mm-hmm.
really was the motivation for breaking free, is that if I could debunk some of the deep rooted beliefs and fears and put light on them and explain them out, where someone sits there and goes, oh, okay, it's not me. Because the biggest thing with victims is, as much as they're trying to be survivors and thrivers, that there's this fundamental thing that every now and then will just drag them back into the pit of pain. And if they haven't got a full understanding of what's causing them to be down there, it can be actually, extremely traumatizing all over again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it's a memory about, that was a really bad event. I wouldn't want to do that again. This is reliving the trauma all
Mm-hmm.
over again. Their body reacts to it, their mind reacts to it, every sense they've got is reacting to that trauma. So the more empowered they are with information about even those things, the easier it is for them to come out of those dark times when they, slip in for whatever reason, whatever's triggered them to go there. So
No, and
yeah,
I don't think, I mean, I don't think this is anything anyone can escape. I mean, even
no,
if it wasn't child sexual abuse, it could have been, some type of horrible emotional abuse or
yeah.
something like that. You just can't forget it.
No, and so, like I look at you know, even for myself, like you look at some of the issues that you've done layers and layers and layers of inner work on. And that's how inner work works. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what the experience is that you're trying to unpack and the emotions that you're trying to resolve. Every emotion's got so many different layers on it, and when you're ready, you'll go down deeper. So it's not like you haven't resolved the top part of that emotion, but it's some of them get so deep in you that
Mhm.
anything that changes your fundamental sense of self is really deep in you. And if it's when you're a child and you haven't had a chance to even build um, a, a slight understanding of yourself, you know what I mean, it's really, really hard. So
Mhm.
and I find that with people in long term, oh, not long term, but narcissistic relationships as well, whether it's, you know,
Mhm.
partners or mothers or siblings, etc. That's that it's that really that energy of indifference of how it impacts is that it really, you know, leaves an emotional scar.
Probably, well, because when they, not to sound stupid, but when they've gone through this and then they go to choose a mate, a spouse, they're basically picking what they're used to and how
Yeah,
they're used
we
to being treated.
gravitate to what's familiar. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that, you know, I always say on a soul level, there's a couple of reasons why we do that. Is that, you know, well, if we need another round of it to really understand
Mhm.
and get to that point where we can really put ourselves on the priority list, because one of the things with victims is, you know, and like I said, every victim's different, but there's, you know, there's this sense of unworthiness, there's this inner shame, there's all these different things that really, you know, in a perfect world, we'd say, well, you know, you don't need to have that, off you go, but it doesn't work like that. So you gravitate to what's familiar, and you've got this edge on you as well, thinking that you don't deserve anything brilliant because you're scared you're going to taint it, you know. Or that's what different victims say, is like, well, even if I had someone that really, really loved me and treated me well,
Mhm.
I didn't think I deserved it, so I would have sabotaged it anyway. So
Mhm.
there's all these different mixes of how people react, and our, you know, as humans, our first reaction is to resist resolving our emotions. We believe that if we suppress it hard enough and, you know, put lots of things on top of it, we can hide it from ourselves, but we don't. We live it. So,
Mhm.
you know, and these are the ways it comes out. So, which is actually heart wrenching when you hear,
Mhm.
you know, there's a part in the book where I say I got to a point where I thought it wouldn't matter what I heard, what I don't like calling them stories, but recounts of history from
Mhm.
people that, you know, I had heard so much that, you know, it wouldn't faze me. But every single person, actually, when I listen to this, to their recount, it's like it always affects me because they're so horrific. And some people's experience, I just think, how are you still upright, you know? So, and no
Mhm.
wonder you'd have some problems, because there are some really horrific and sad stories out there.
Oh, definitely. And I know you mentioned that, these pedophiles, they can, manipulate the victim and silence them, whether it
Yeah.
be a family member or even a stranger, maybe with threats. I don't know.
Well, it's just really interesting because a lot of the I never know whether to call them victims, survivors, or thrivers, but the people that have you know, lived this, a lot of them said it was never verbally said, don't say anything, but they
Mm,
knew not to. And so that, you know, so there's this pressure to keep it quiet. And then I've also had a lot of people that did go and tell someone. You know, I've had clients that went and told their mother,
mm,
and her response was, well, it happened to me and I survived. You know, so it's doubly as bad. And then, you know, people that have gone to school and told a teacher and then had to recant the statement because the pressure at home and all that sort of stuff. And that creates a lot of, you know, inner turmoil as well. And then you have some poor whistleblowers who, you know, say, hang on, something's not right here, but we
mm,
have that innate reaction that, oh, well, unless I have evidence, you know, can I really accuse someone of that? And if I do accuse them and the victim says no, you know, which does happen because they're conditioned to say nothing and they're scared. So there's all these different sort of ways that are silenced. And even as a society, when I first started documenting that well over 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
if I said the word pedophile, the room would empty. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And even, even now I look at the book and I probably have used, I would not have used the word. I probably would have softened it up a little bit. But I was like, oh, well, that's what's happened, and I've wrote it. Because as soon as you start talking about that subject matter, nobody knows what to do about it. Nobody knows how to fix the problem. And it's very disturbing to hear about it. But I always say to those people, well, how do you think those people that have lived that experience feel when everybody shuns it? It's like, bring it up and hold it out there so people really understand the impact of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was going to say, it's fascinating. I had a friend who was a single dad, and he had a little girl, and he was saying, I don't know, when I go shopping, and she said, oh, I need to go to the toilet. He said, it's a nightmare because, he's a big tattooed fella. And he said, like if I took her to the men's toilet and then found her washing her hands in the urinal one time, so that was no good. And I let her go into the ladies' toilets, and then she wasn't strong enough to open the door to get back out. And then when I go into the parents' room, he said some of the mothers would get scared because, this big fella standing there. And he said, he said, I can't not have her near me because I'm frightened someone, will abuse her. And I said, oh, you know pedophiles. And he goes, no, I don't. And there was a big, how dare you say that, mucking around. And I said, no, if 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 girls in our country, Australia, has been abused, then that means, you and I know pedophiles. We just don't know that they know them. And he was absolutely shocked. He was like, that'd have to be true. And I went, yes. So it's this thing in society that none of us want to believe is happening. And the victim is the one that pays that price because we don't want to know. And even our court system sometimes backs that up by not giving, strong penalties and making it easy for the victim to come forward.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that man was also worried about being called a pedophile with
Yes,
taking
he
his
was
kid into
actually.
the bathroom, you know. I feel sorry for guys because, they're trying to take care of their kids. And then, someone can make a false accusation and their lives are ruined.
Oh, absolutely. And it does happen. The trouble is it's not as, and it's also the get out of jail free card for people,
Mm,
like for pedophiles, because they go, oh, fancy accusing me of this. But then if you're falsely accused of it, it's a how do you get the stain off you if you're innocent? So, and
mhm,
I did have once a friend's father come around and see me, years after we used to go water skiing with him, and lovely man, no issues.
mhm,
And somebody had accused him of it, and he come around and said, I just want to ask you, was there ever anything that made you feel uncomfortable with me? And he said, because I can't believe this is happening. And I said, no. But then I said, but in the back of my head, as much as I really know you, and I can guarantee you, as far as I know, he's definitely a top bloke. But I said,
mhm,
there's still that little bit in my head going, well, if you're accused of it, maybe there's smoke where there's fire. And he goes,
mhm,
he said, I know that's how everyone's thinking. And I said,
mhm,
well, he asked me to be honest. So,
mhm,
but I truly do believe that he was innocent, but it was still that type of accusation, because it's one of those things that you can't, how do you know? So,
mhm.
yeah,
Well,
it's
it's such a gray area in a way.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why in history most people have turned the other cheek and pretended they didn't see or didn't know or weren't sure, because it is one of those things. If you are accused of it and the accuser is wrong, then it's a stain that you don't get off yourself. But it's quite fascinating, different stories of when pedophiles have been found out and they just get up and move town,
Mhm, mhm,
so then people go, oh, well, that's good, they're not a threat here. But it was like, which
mm,
is what we've seen, what they did with the priests,
Mm-hmm.
in the Catholic Church, but then you just moved the problem to somewhere else, and then it took a
Mm-hmm.
while for everyone to realise there. So you actually gave him a new playground, and so all those kind of things. And we have got this huge history behind us where we've ignored it, and people in power that could have done something about it
Mm-hmm.
absolutely ignored it or participated, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Well,
so it's very, yeah,
oh,
you
I'm
go.
sorry. Well, if these people in power, if they just ignore it, then they are also participators in child abuse.
Yeah, definitely. I had a a young bloke. Oh, well, when I say young bloke, he was in his early 20s, and he said that it's a strange story, but he said he liked porn. I was like, okay. And he said, but then all this child porn started to come onto his feed or whatever he was looking at. And he said, but I'm not doing anything wrong because I didn't actually ask for that. But he said, I must admit, I looked at it and I went, you are doing something wrong because you are the customer and you are participating, and because you did look at it, you are part of that child being abused. And he couldn't correlate the two together, and I said, they're not little plastic dolls over here, that what you're watching has had an impact on someone's life. So but it was just that sort of separation between the reality of what he was looking at and his perception of what he was telling himself it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we have that disconnect when we talk about pedophiles and sexual abuse and childhood abuse. There's this disconnection that people sort of approach it, and it's like, no, the kids don't get over it. They grow up with problems, and they have these major issues, and we're still learning how to actually deal with that. And I always a big advocate for it. It is the victims that will teach us how to help them if we're willing to listen to them. So because you can tell. I know a lot of veteran survivors, and you can tell the difference in them to the people that are still struggling. Is that there's a big journey that has to occur for them to feel comfortable with themselves, because their sense of being significant has been attacked.
Mm-hmm.
So they're rebuilding that sense of, yeah, I am a significant human, I'm a good person, I didn't deserve that. All that's got to be rebuilt, and it's got to be something that they know and understand, not
Mm-hmm.
white knuckle themselves to try and believe it, like, because that
Mm-hmm.
won't. It's not sustainable. It can be a starting point, but it's not sustainable. So it's a big recovery process.
Mm-hmm.
So huge.
Do you think, like people that are looking at adult pornography, that can lead them to pedophilia with children?
Well, I haven't got any personal connection to that. I just, a couple of studies I've read where they say that you become bored with what you're looking at. So you start moving the goalpost a little bit to look at this, look at this, look at this,
Mm-hmm.
and so that there is studies that are saying that's how it kind of, for some, that's how they start, you know,
Mm-hmm.
broaching into that pedophilia stuff. Some are just born, they
Mm-hmm.
were born with that, that desire, and some of the results of abuse. There's not one set of rules for how pedophiles become, and there's not one set of rules of how victims react either.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that for every victim, it should be looked at on an individual case and dealt with from that position. So, because what works for one person, like when I'm working with clients, you might, once somebody understands the concept of significance and that feeling of being a friend to yourself and nurturing yourself back, acknowledging that your kindness is of value and acknowledging different things about yourself, that can sometimes be a stepping stone to them feeling more empowered and more at ease with themselves. And for other clients, it's like you have to pull apart the pedophile and let them see them for who they are, what they actually did, just not on just the physical level. And once they get their head around that, they can go, oh my God, I have been abused, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of a lot of victims struggle. They know they've been abused, but they struggle with what that actually means for
Mm-hmm.
them. So, because they have, they might have been groomed to believe that they asked for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like some pedophiles are absolutely brilliant in their manipulative skills.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll be, "Oh, no, I wasn't abused. I volunteered." Well, no, you didn't. You were 12 and someone paid you attention and you liked the attention, but you didn't volunteer to be abused.
Mm-hmm.
So and a lot of misconceptions, I think, for when a child's abused, in their mind they're trying to work out how that happened or why that happened to them, especially if they're, sometimes you get families where, grandfather might have abused this child but he didn't touch the others, which he's doing. So if he ever gets accused of it, he can say, well, yeah, there's 5 other girls that they're not saying I touched them. So they do it, some of them do it for that backup reason.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard. So sometimes it's for victims, it's actually getting them to understand that they didn't deserve it and they were abused.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's complex. It's a complex subject.
And I'm sure they wrestle with this their whole lives, and some of them are even driven to suicidal attempts.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's a big, like even drug abuse and the jail system. If you talk to any of the counsellors and people that work in those industries, sort of thing, that they'll say to you, like, well, 97% of them are being abused. So, like it starts there. They're trying to escape what
Mm-hmm.
they can't cope within. Because, I know myself with my clientele that I know, several clients where I'm the only person on the planet that actually knows that they've been abused, and
Mm-hmm.
and they still had to face up Christmas dinner and sit opposite
Mm-hmm.
their abuser and things like that. But they've died, and they've died of cancer and um, you know sort of young deaths too. Really, it's just that, and I always think that internal turmoil is affecting their body as much as
Mm-hmm.
which is really sad. I find that, I find it really heart-wrenching that we've got, because of someone's actions, that these people have got a lifetime of trying to, you
Mm-hmm.
know, hold themselves upright and remind themselves that they're a decent person and all the rest of it. So, which, they do. They
Mm-hmm.
are.
Well, in Australia, you probably have the ACEs scores that you go off of. Uh,
Well, for me, what I do is, with the when someone starts talking about abuse, is start trying to build a foundation underneath them. And, like, so it's kind of, I come at it from a different angle
mm-hmm.
to everything, because I'm looking at it, for me, it's like I'm looking at a soul who's had
Mm-hmm.
this horrific experience, and how do you get that person, that soul, to tap back into themselves. So,
Mm-hmm.
I work from a different sort of angle for it. So, and then I always say, there was a bit of a spiritual thing going around where, you thank the people that caused you the grief in life because they made you, search and all the rest of it. I'm not an advocate for that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, you acknowledge the truth, you accept the truth of what you've experienced, and then you build on from there. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to go through this big process of justifying what's happened to you through different spiritual beliefs. I think sometimes those things do more damage to people. So
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I sort of went off in a different tangent
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah,
there.
I mean, because I was thinking, when these things are publicized, this often makes it worse for the victim, as well as having to continuously relive it, say if they're going to court over it.
Oh yeah, it's horrific for them. It's absolutely horrific. And there's a lot of court cases that don't actually make it to the court. Like
Mm-hmm.
it breaks down before them, but that person has really lived, quite a turbulent time. And I think it's, again, heartbreaking for someone that is brave enough, because it takes a lot of courage to stand up, and especially, if it's against someone with wealth, or someone, that an organization like the churches or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
any group, um, to actually feel that pushback, and know that your life is going to be pulled apart.
Mm-hmm.
So they're sitting there going, well, you used to be a drug addict. Yeah, I did, because, I couldn't cope with what was
Mm-hmm.
happening. But then that becomes another stigma on top of them. Or, you've got mental illness problems. Yes, because I was abused, so it
Mm-hmm.
kind of, the symptoms of it end up being also the things that you can be used against them, instead of being seen as well, this is what happens, sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
for some people. So yeah,
And
it's
that's re-victimizing the victim, which is not helping anything. And they've got PTSD, I'm sure depression, anxiety, and then
oh yeah,
they're
yeah,
being, it's just terrible that they're being re-victimized,
yeah,
even by
and
perfect strangers.
exactly. And that goes back to, we don't know how to respond to it, so we try to avoid it. But
Mm-hmm.
then if you're the victim, and it's you're very vulnerable if your story's out in the public, and then all of a sudden everyone's, picking it to pieces and looking for faults. And and then one of the biggest things is, they look for you to, name the date and the time and where
Mm-hmm.
were you and all the rest of it. And especially for a child, they might remember it was summer. They might
Mm-hmm.
remember that, I was at so and so's house, but they can't tell you it was Wednesday and Thursday of the week that I stayed there. Like, because their memories aren't there. They're, as soon as the child's abused, I always say, you disassociate. So the
Mm-hmm.
abuse makes you separate from yourself, and then there's like a fog, that comes in, and then they're trying to operate from the fog. So, and then they normally, straight up suppress it. It's rare that a child's going to be abused and walk out and say, "Guess what? Just what happened to me."
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's suppressed and it's hidden, and they don't know what to do about it. So there's a lot of confusion and fear. So
Mm-hmm.
for them to go back and look at it, that's what they remember. They remember how it
Mm-hmm.
felt, or their fear level, or a smell, or that kind of thing. So, we ask them to go, give complete details that,
Mm-hmm.
no 5-year-old can actually give us. So it's quite, it's a harrowing experience for them to go through. But then we need them to do that, because then we need to sort of get where our laws and even our public understanding of what this really is, and
Mm-hmm.
how damaging it really is. So, um, for it to move, like for people to, change laws, work out ways to deal with it better.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this could also lead to dissociative disorders
Oh,
with
absolutely.
these people?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it fractures their foundation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it's like, you know, if you're feeling completely worthless and completely helpless, and you're frightened about what's going to happen tomorrow, because that's the big thing. Sometimes I can pick a victim in a room, because I'll look to see where the doors are,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll they'll stand where their backs to things, so that they've got some form of protection, and they don't realize they're doing it, but they're
Mm-hmm.
doing it to try and safeguard themselves. And the other thing that they're always, not all of them, of course, but the majority, is that when they walk into a room of people, they're frightened of what people are going to judge them on, or what is it that they can see in them, because they feel so damaged. Is it noticeable? And they get the shame shudders, I call them, where, they run through this, there's something wrong with me, before they've even opened their mouths. So it's a it's an internal prison that the
Mm-hmm.
pedophile has created for them to live with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's so unfair, to start out
very.
life, like either as a 6-year-old having this happen, or a 12-year-old, or even a 16-year-old. This is just so unfair that these narcissists, sadists would inflict this on another human being.
Yeah, and I don't think it really matters the age, even if
Mhm,
you're raped at 50-year-old, do you know what I
mhm,
mean? Like that it's that absolute violation of not only your physical body, but also, in my words, your soul, but that
mhm,
inner sanctum of yourself. So, it would be very hard when you've got an understanding of it. Imagine a child that doesn't even understand what, sex is or body
mhm,
parts or all the rest of it. So there's just
mhm,
this complete confusion. And the amount of times, if I had $1 for every time a victim said, I thought this was happening to everybody. I thought this was something that happened that nobody talked about. And, I got very surprised when I worked out that, it was happening at our house, but not next door or the neighbours, like that their dad didn't treat them that way, or, all the rest of
mhm,
it. And then you
mhm,
have the other thing, whereas if say it was your father or an uncle or a relative, and they're the abuser of somebody outside the family, that's
mhm,
hard for those children to, if at all, if he gets caught, that's absolutely hard for them to come to reason with. Hang on, but to me, he's grandpa or whatever. That couldn't be right. So, and
mhm,
even siblings, like when you've got older siblings abusing younger siblings, like
mhm,
that's another thing that, if the parents find out about it, where do they go?
mhm,
How do it's still my son or daughter, and that's still my son and daughter, like, so
mhm,
so you get all these different combinations that are so confusing, and they're so emotionally charged because no one wants to believe and that anyone could possibly do that to another person, and nobody deserves it. Nobody deserves that kind of
mhm.
abuse. No.
And as you were saying before, you've got to go through holidays and sit across from your abuser, and that also, rips the soul apart even further
Oh, absolutely. And
because
it's
none of this was acknowledged.
Yeah, exactly. And it does another layer to it. And it's interesting when you are working with people that you know, might be their mother will say, Uncle Joe's coming, you better come round for a cuppa. And they're like, but he's my abuser, like, so yeah,
Mhm,
yeah, yeah, that was a long time ago. No, like, so that sort of like, let's smooth the waters and keep the family, running along. And then, so it's just another a sense of indifference that comes at the victim of like, well, your opinion of this doesn't count. Could you please just come along and play the game?
mm,
And it's incredible that they're even asked, and how often
mm,
victims are asked to, let's just play the game, play nice, and it's
mhm,
another silencing. It's silencing them, or they then accuse them of being the troublemaker,
mm,
like, so
yeah,
so they get abused again. So and really, like, I get asked a lot, if someone, if my child's been abused, what do I do? And I was like, you stand beside them and you support them, and
mhm,
you make sure they know that you believe them, and that
mhm,
you acknowledge that this is painful and it's difficult, and that you're not sure how to help them, or all the rest of it, because the victim mentality too can come into play, and that can be so damaging, and that has long-term ramifications as
mhm,
well. So it's a real fine line to walk as a supporter but not an enabler, and
mhm,
as someone that will, you know nurse you but not encourage you to play the game. And a lot of people don't know how to deal with a victim, so they become enablers, and then it kind of teaches the victim to be manipulative with their victim stuff. And not many people talk about that as well. And it's it's ugly as well, but it's a reaction to not knowing what to do, or how to keep themselves safe.
mhm,
So it's a very complex thing to pull apart, and it's very complex to know how to support someone
Mm-hmm.
where you're helping them lift up instead of training them how to use that space of victim mentality.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
I know of a case where um, this person was molested by some old man in a neighborhood in this rundown town. Okay. And she went home and told her parents. They just didn't do anything. They didn't even call the police. They didn't take her to an emergency room. Nothing was ever acknowledged or done. And it's affected her life forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because I've got the flip story is the difference between when there's a threat and you are supported. So
Mm-hmm.
I can remember was in high school, and this old guy, and real gruffy looking, sort of what you'd think for a pedophile too, that look, which they don't have a look, but that's the teenage thought. And he just started saying hello to me, and then I was sitting on the front veranda with Dad, and I just said, this guy just keeps, all of a sudden at the back end of school where we walk out, he says, hello, hello, Lorraine, hello. So, like, it's bizarre. And he's like, well, like, let me know. Anyway, then he drove past our house, and we lived in a dead end at the time. And I was like, there he is there. And he stopped. So we didn't know him. He stopped and he came in to the yard. So he was sussing out what was my family life, all the rest of it. And Dad just said to me, don't say a word, just be quiet. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And then he just said, who are you? And he's, I'm friends with your daughter. And he goes, no, you're not. And he was straight up supportive. He was straight up, I am the protector of my daughter, and made this guy absolutely know. I won't quote what he said, but absolutely no, you go anywhere near her. And then our dog come out of nowhere and bit him, which the dog never bit anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And his final statement was, my dog doesn't like you, never come on my land again, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if he'd walked into a place where there was a dysfunctional family,
Mm-hmm.
which I no doubt he did. I don't think I was Robinson Crusoe. I think I was just one on a list. I was lucky that I had someone that was on the ball.
Mm-hmm.
He was sussing it out, and that makes me feel gross and
Mm-hmm.
ugh, and nothing happened to me. But I'm not scarred by it because I
Mm-hmm.
was supported. That non-support does as much damage as the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because it's
Definitely.
another form of indifference.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of individuals like this that case out the whole situation
Oh,
of and just they get fixated on a certain child.
yeah.
And there's, at least over here, if a person was released from prison that was a child sex abuser, they're on obviously a registry, a list,
Yeah.
but they cannot live anywhere near children.
Yeah.
So they also have to have, like, I think a sign or some type of certificate, in the window saying that they're a child abuser.
Oh, okay. We don't have the window thing. We have it on their driver's license, but we don't
Okay,
have it
because
on the window.
I'm not sure if we have it on the window anymore.
Right.
There was an app that we could have on our phones that if you typed in your closest child abusers in your vicinity, they would pop up in the
Right.
addresses.
Yeah, right. Well, it's
Mhm.
good in one way, isn't it? Like, but then again, if you've been falsely accused, you've got a long way to go. And you
Mhm.
know what I mean? But I always say that it's there are some pedophiles that you just go, my gut reaction picks you, and like just about everyone
Mhm.
on the planet goes, well, they're a bit sus.
Mhm.
They're the good ones because you can see them. You can see
Mhm.
that there's a potential threat.
Mhm.
But the majority of the ones, that you can't tell. They can be your best mate and you'll never know. So you can have brothers and not know that one brother's into pedophilia. So
Mhm.
they're the ones that I always say they're more dangerous because you can't see them. So,
Mhm.
but it's yeah, it's it's just one of those things that it gets very hidden, like, and we're more open about it now than
Mm-hmm.
ever before. But then we also have more threat now because,
Mm-hmm.
if we go back, say, 50 years ago, and you were a pedophile, you would have to be very careful who you told you were interested in it. So you didn't really have a support network unless you were, in a certain, group. Whereas now you can go online and you can find a support network within seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're sharing tips, and they're, educating each other on different things and techniques, and they're encouraging each other, just because they now have a support group to say, this is okay,
Mm-hmm.
So one of the reviews that got removed from Breaking Free was, I won't say his name because it was probably a false name anyway, but he wrote on it, Lorraine Nilon is making money out of pedophilia. And then when it said Seymour, he went into this big spiel on how it was natural and we should embrace it and all the rest of it. And I thought, well, how many
Whoa.
victims have you got to touch that review and then get hit with that, which is again abusive? So, but they, Goodreads and Amazon did remove it, as soon as we identified it there. But
Mm-hmm.
that level of arrogance of I'm entitled to do this, and some actually really believe it's a type of love that
Mm-hmm.
they're showering. I love this child so much. Of course, I want to spend some time with it this
Mm-hmm.
way. It's like, oh my God, really?
Yeah,
That's
that's
how you're going to
sick.
justify it. It
Mm-hmm.
is sick. So, but it is the, that the victims, even us sitting here talking about it, that's it. Sometimes it can empower them, that
Mm-hmm.
people are supportive of them, and sometimes you never know what's going to be a trigger for them as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that's this really sensitive area, and it's a fine line. That's why I always try to be very respectful of the victim, because this
Mm-hmm.
is their life that we're talking about. It's their experience. So, and it's something
Right.
none of us we're so happy that
No.
we didn't have that experience.
Oh,
Completely
exactly.
grateful.
Well,
Yeah.
back when I was a psychiatric nurse back in the 90s, I was a floor nurse, but
Yeah.
we were always on our floors, we were assigned to male staff members at all times. They were like bodyguards if a patient were to flip out, right?
Yeah.
But there was a known pedophile. I believe the police had put them, or he was maybe court ordered on this psych unit for eval and then to go somewhere else. But it was, ordered that no female nurses come in contact with him. So, the male staff members had to, talk to him, counsel him, then he would see the psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but and not all molesters are male. There's female
Oh,
molesters too.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's not talked about as much, but yeah,
right,
definitely.
right. Um, the thing is, it's like when I saw him, he had the black glasses. You could tell there's something wrong with this person,
Right.
and it's like I said, it's not just men. There's women out there too that are doing this to children.
Yeah, and I've had, like, I haven't had a lot of male clients because they,
Mm,
they hide it even more. But the few that I have,
mm,
it's and two that's just come to mind. It was their mother, and it was just for them, it's just like this whole another level, like, for them to try and come to terms with it. So it's like, it's A, it's my mother, B, it's just so disgusting, and C, I couldn't say anything to anyone. Like,
mm,
I don't even know where to go to ask for help. So there is a huge impact, but there are female predators, and it's interesting because I've talked to a few men that were 12-year-old when their next door neighbor had fun with them, but they
mm,
didn't class it as abuse because they were just lucky that it you know I was young and I was lucky that she was interested in me and all the rest of it. And I was like, really think about that, like so there was a different sort of shadowing that comes over the top of it. So, some of them don't perceive it as abuse, but, at the same time, there's an impact on them. So they don't correlate the difference to why they feel unworthy and why they don't feel good about themselves and feel dirty and all the rest of it to I was an abuse victim. That's why some victims, you have to explain to them how they were an abuse victim, which is
Mm-hmm.
it sounds really weird, but it's like, that get their head around, you were manipulated, that's
Mm-hmm.
grooming.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your fault. A lot of effort went into grooming you to agree. You didn't just agree, you were manipulated to that position. So there's so many different elements that
Mm-hmm.
occur
Like
in any.
the brainwashing.
Yeah, yeah. And any abuse recount and story, event, there's so much that goes into it that, when you're unpacking it, because every victim, I haven't met a victim yet that didn't blame themselves in one way or another.
Mm.
I had one lady, I always use her as an example, and she said, oh no, I had a pair of pajamas on that had a shoestring, sleeve on it, little top. And I was like, yeah, pajamas. And she was like, yeah, well, shouldn't have worn that. And I was like, you were 5, like, come on,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's not your fault, but that's how the child brain
Mm-hmm.
had, well, I did something wrong and this is the punishment. And,
Mm-hmm.
he thought I was so bad that he could do that to me. So,
Mm.
when you've got to sort of get them and say, hang on, like, let's step this back and let's really pull that apart, and go and have a look at a 5-year-old. Does any 5-year-old, deserve to be abused, even if they were, loud and noisy and,
Mm-hmm.
I would call that full of life.
Right.
Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
it's that's part of the grooming. There was things would have been said and so that they believe that. So, um, yeah, and even um, different situations where the pedophile sets up the family to be reliant on them. I've heard, um, bosses abusing the kids, and even though the parents didn't know, they just thought it was a bit odd that he, wanted to take them fishing all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
but he's the boss and all those kind of things. So, and we do as humans try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but
Mm-hmm.
anything to do with child abuse is like, yeah, nah, you just, if you're uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable. So trust that. And even if you're wrong, it doesn't matter. You've kept that child safe, as best you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, when I was raising my kids, I was always worried about this constantly.
Mm.
Would something, you just worried. And even after, I was divorced and I would be dating guys, I would have dreams like, what if this happens? And I was just very, very on the alert of who I was dating to make sure they were on the up and up. And no
Yeah.
one could see my kids for like 3 months till I knew they were okay, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Of course, and I would never leave them alone with whoever I was
Yeah.
dating because you just don't know.
No, you don't. And it's really funny because I've met people and I didn't pick them. Not that, they weren't left with my kids or anything, but
Mhm,
girlfriends, new partners and things like that. And
mhm,
then when it comes out, there's a little bit, you go, oh, yeah, okay. Like you can sort of piece things together a little bit, but, completely understood why they thought he was fine. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Like,
mhm,
it is complex because when I was writing, Breaking Free, well, when I was documenting it, basically, I sort of correlated it for a long time and then sort of put it all together and all the rest of it. But that was when I was raising my girls as well. And they weren't allowed to play in the front yard, in the backyard.
mhm,
So, so that we could see you. And, and I had all these sort of, trying to keep my kids safe rules. And then I had a client walk in and she said, oh, this neighbor used to pick me up out of the backyard and take me over the fence, and then he would put me back. And I was just like,
Mm,
oh, that blew that rule. You know what I mean? Like, it was like
mhm,
all these things. And I was just like, it just goes to show, one thing I say about pedophiles is they're opportunists. Like
mhm,
they are looking for opportunities. They will take opportunities if they get it. So as a, because I've had a lot of parents that are just beating themselves up that they didn't keep their kids safe and can't believe it happened on their watch. But it's like,
mhm,
you're not looking for that from those different people. So if you're not looking for it, and even if you did, what are you going to look for? You didn't know he was, taking that child out of the backyard. Those kind of things. So it's
mhm,
yeah, there's just so many layers to abuse.
mhm.
So yeah.
It's very scary, very scary, you
It
know.
is, and I think the good thing is we're more aware of it now. Like we
Mhm,
we are, as parents, I grew up in the generation, as long as you were at home before the street lights came on and you
mhm,
were there to eat tea, you could go and do whatever you wanted to do, like,
mhm,
and we never felt threatened, or we never had any issues. But we don't let our kids do that anymore.
mhm,
Like we keep them closer. We keep them more in supervised things, or they're inside, so that
mhm,
they're not wandering the streets on their push bikes anymore. But I think that's had an impact because we
mhm.
are more aware of that threat.
Oh,
So
definitely.
yeah,
I mean, even I would take my kids to the public pool, and they always had a great time there. But there was, I would say, an older teen that would hang around the boys, like where they have to
yeah,
exit the pool to go to the front so you could leave where my car was.
yeah,
And, I saw one of my boys go in, and I saw him go in, and I was watching and I was like looking at my watch counting seconds, and I went over to the lifeguard and I said, "What do you know about that kid?"
yeah,
And he just said, "Well, he's a troubled individual, lives with the grandparents, and they're moving very soon." And so I was like, okay, so I timed it. It was 4 seconds. My kid walks out, back to me. So I'm thinking, obviously, nothing happened in 4 seconds. I don't think, I hope not. He didn't say anything because I did ask him. I said, nothing happened in there. And he said, no,
yeah,
and because I felt they were way too young. They were like 5, 6 years old, 4 or 5 years old. I didn't want to bring up that topic,
yeah,
to them at that age. But I just said, just be careful of that older boy. I just want you to be careful. Don't go near him. That's all I
yeah.
said.
Well, when my girl, I got twin girls, and when they were little, if because twins, people would, gravitate to have a look and all that sort of
Mhm.
thing, oh, cute little twins. But if they showed any uncomfortability or if they shied away, I didn't force them to say hello, to strangers.
Mhm.
I'd just say, if you feel uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable. And then I'd say, oh, they're shy, see you later. And off we go. And there's a couple of times when they were little, not that I was accusing this person of going to abuse them in the supermarket, but they were getting to know us,
Mhm.
and it was sort of the twin factor. But they were all that my kids were always shy. I was like, no, you don't have to say hello. Like that. I think it's teach them to use that inner warning system.
Mhm.
Like you don't knock that out of them. So they, even now, and they, they're grown now, but they say, oh, sometimes I go, oh, something, no, I don't gel with that person, and I trust that I don't need to. You just say hello and keep walking. And I was like, good, trust that little signaling within yourself, because what we normally do is, go,
Mhm.
oh no, give them a cuddle, say hello, and force them
Mhm.
to be nice. But we're deprogramming their natural
Mhm.
warning system. So, that I was always very aware of not doing that to them. It's like, no, if you're not comfortable, we're just going to trust there's a reason for that. there's a difference between I'm shy and I'm uncomfortable. So
Mm-hmm.
sort of got them to understand the difference between the two. And I as a mother, always trusted it. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, leave it at that. So,
Oh, yes.
yeah, yeah. So that inner warning system, I mean, it's done me a favor in different situations where
Uh-huh.
I've trusted it. So yeah, yeah. So, and I think that's what, it doesn't mean the kid's being rude to anyone. It's just they're not comfortable. We'll accept that. See you later. And most people would generally go, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and not take offense to it, because you don't want to make the child uncomfortable.
Oh,
So
exactly. It's because kids are self-conscious as it is,
yeah,
and you don't want to make it worse. And
yeah,
uh, it's just
yeah.
so hard growing up nowadays in this realm
Well,
of
they're exposed to a lot, and they're exposed to this idea of sexy and being sexy and seen as a
mm-hmm,
sex object, as that's popularity that gives you some form of, leverage and all the rest of it. We're actually giving them the wrong message. Like I had an older bloke in town one day, and he was talking about the different types of music he used to listen to when he was a young bloke, which would have been old country and western and all that sort of stuff. And he said, and he was listening to his grandson's music, and he was like, I didn't understand any of it, but he said all I could hear them was putting women down,
mm-hmm,
asking to be hoes, and he
mm-hmm,
said, I said to him, I hope you don't think that's how you treat women. Otherwise, you'll never be good for a woman. And I thought it was lovely that he said that. You'll never be good for a woman if that's how
mm-hmm,
you're thinking. He
mm-hmm,
didn't say you wouldn't get a good woman. He said you'd never be good for a woman. And I thought, oh God, that's beautiful the way that you've explained that. And he said, oh, he
mm-hmm,
said, I can remember listening to songs where writers had wrote about, the love they had for their mother, or the appreciation they had for their family. And he said, you don't hear any of that anymore. And I was like, yeah, he's got a point. So, we
mm-hmm,
are sort of just zeroing in on this, one style of of popularity, and sex sells, so it's not like it's going to
mm-hmm.
change. Like
Right.
wherever it's working, that's where we're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So
Definitely.
yes, yeah, we're sort of a
Oh,
little bit messed up, aren't we?
yes. Oh, I don't know if it will. I mean, I hope it will change, and bringing attention to these things make people more
Yeah,
aware,
I think we're all starting, to look at wanting more meaning and purposeful events in our life. And I think we're coming out of that shallow era of wanting, material and materialistic stuff and all the rest of it. And maybe it was the COVID event, we call it around here,
Mhm,
the COVID event, that has made us really realize, well, yeah, we're connected with people. We know, we've got more people on social media, but we're not really engaging. We're not feeling like we're in a real relationship with
mhm,
people. And it's those real relationships that feed our soul, that sense of feeling loved and feeling respected and cared for, and being caring and loving and
mhm,
respectful, and that feeds us.
mhm.
Mm,
Most definitely. And I'm so glad I had you on my podcast. I'd like to have you come back on.
no worries.
Oh, that'd be
That'd
great.
be lovely.
How can people reach you if they want to ask you a question?
Yep. There's the website is Lorraine Nilon, lorrainenilon.com.au. And there's a contact there. And you can also, if you want to book a session, you can also book a session through there as well. So what in a session, what I do is actually read your energy.
Mhm,
And I don't just work with victims. I work with anyone. If you're looking for direction, if you're looking to understand yourself better, and I really sort of delve into the emotional baggage and show you how to be more self-reflective about what you've experienced, regardless of what it is, and then so that you can build a better self and life perspective, and then start building a strong sense of who you are, like your uniqueness. So
mhm,
Yeah, so I read what are the barriers to you having full self-acceptance and self-awareness, and then we see where we go from there. So, and there's also an online course now
Mm.
for 7 essential keys for honest self-reflection, and it's a course that you go around, you have to answer questions, and it's real a self-exploration. And then at the end of each chapter is a podcast with someone that's done the questionnaires and how they went. And everyone's going to be different, but it just gives you that little, oh, okay, that's interesting, and something to bounce off. But we're getting lots of good feedback from that online course. So I can throw you all the links
Oh,
and
definitely. Yeah, I'll put them in the podcast notes. And
brilliant.
your book, Breaking Free, and the subtitle is From the Chains of Silence, a respectful exploration into the ramifications of abuse hidden behind closed doors. Where can people find your book?
On all online bookstores. So,
Mm.
Amazon, yeah, all of them, right from Canada to America to Australia, UK, all over. So, yeah, it's available.
Thank you so much for coming on. Lorraine, don't jump off.
Yeah.
As I lose
Don't
my
leave yet.
voice. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Lorraine in the future and other exciting guests. Thank you again, Lorraine. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.